முருகாச்சரணம் அடியேன் உரைத்த புன்சொல் அது மீது நித்தமந்தன் அருளே தழைத்து வந்து வர வேண்டும். நமச்சிவாய வாழ்க, நாதன் தாழ் வாழ்க, எமைப்பொழுதும் மென்னஞ்சல் நீங்காதான் தாழ் வாழ்க. சிவா திருச்சிற்றம்பலம். சிவசிதம்பரம். திருப்பெருந்துறையுரை சிவனே எந்தையே ஈஷா உடல் இடம் கொண்டாய், எந்தையே ஈஷா உடல் இடம் கொண்டாய், யான் இதற்கிலன்னோர்கை மாறே. You gave me yourself and you took me instead. Shankara, that was not very smart. Endless happiness I got from you. What could you have possibly got from me? I'm so happy to join all of you to explain, express, and enjoy the story of Manikkavacakar. He made himself, presented himself as an unworthy person, lucky to get the good God's grace. There are 63 Nayanmars, of whom 4 are preeminent: Sambandar, Appar, Sundarar, and Manikkavacakar. Sekilar wrote the stories of all the 63. Today, we will see the life story of Manikkavacakar. Most of us are not poets or even good at writing prose. How could we possibly compose a prayer? It'll be awesome if there is a template, right? There are templates. You just repeat the pre-made words and it has a pre-composed prayer. One example is a Sankalpam. About a week back, on the full moon day of Shravana month, a lot of people repeat Maha Sankalpam as a part of Yajñopavita Dharanam on Avaniyavattam day. It lists all the mistakes. It's all pre-made for you, right? Everything that people make all year long. Samapatakanam, Upapatakanam, Malinikarananam, Apatrikarananam, etc. But a lot of this is in Sanskrit. What about all the simple people? You know, when we went to school in India, most of us didn't know English as a first language. So one of the first things you'll learn is how to write a leave letter. It's the first carry thing that you have to write in English. So, respected sir, as I am not feeling well today due to stomach pain, I will not be able to come to school today. Sincerely, Sai Krishna. So next month, my sister is getting married and I have to write a leave letter. So what do I write? As I am not feeling well due to my sister's marriage, I will not be able to come to school today. So see how hard it is to write a leave letter in another language? For the common man, Manikkavacakar has given the template. You just repeat the words that he gives. You just repeat his lines. And he gives the bhava, the feeling that one should have. If there is one thing you take away today, take these lines away. Tankadan adiyenayum dangadal yengadan mani shaidagedapade. Oh Lord. Your duty is to support this lowly person, and my duty is to just keep serving. Service above self. Repeat the prayer every day. Shiva will be duty bound to support you through the ups and downs of life that you have earned through our karmas. In the town of Tiruvadavur, in Pandya kingdom, was born a boy in a pious Brahmin family. His parents named him Vadavura after the birthplace. As the child grew, he was noticed as a prodigy. Quickly, Vadavura had mastered all the scriptures. The king of Madurai heard Vadavura's special qualities and discovered that he was an all-rounder and he could be very proficient in the administration of the government as well. So the king made Vadavura his prime minister. He was obviously not one of the kids in my school. So one of the kids wrote this on the history quiz. What ended in the year 1918? And his answer was 1917. As days passed, however, dispassion grew in Vadavura's heart. He wasn't happy being a prime minister. He realized the unreality of the world. He would invite a lot of learned scholars to discuss the intricate points in the Vedas. Soon he realized that a guru was necessary for real progress and started in search of his guru. Obviously, he was nothing like the kids from my school. They needed extra homework just to get the basics right. See, the answer was, where was the Declaration of Independence signed? At the bottom. So as days, on one day, while the king was holding court, the head of his cavalry entered and announced. You guys know that cavalry is the horse army, right? He said, "Oh, king, we need to get new horses for our cavalry. It is depleted too much." The king turns to Vadavura and says, "Minister, you take money from the treasury and go buy some fine horses." Vadavura was very happy, thinking, this is the best chance to take a detour and go search for my real guru. This is a God-sent opportunity, he thought. Little did he know, it really was a God-sent opportunity. Kind of like how this session is for me. Vadavura started on the road trip with the money and servants. He reached the town of Tirupparandurai. Lord Shiva had decided at this time to pull him in. Irthiyamai atkonda yandai peramane. He will later recall this incident. My Lord, who attracted and pulled me in. Shiva himself had reached the same town at that time. He was disguised as a Brahmin and was holding the book, Shiva Jnana Bhotam, the wisdom of Shiva. He sat showing the Chin Mudra and surrounded by students, all seated under a tree. Vadavura entered the temple, prayed to Shiva, like we all do, and went around the temple. He reached the tree. He heard the Panchakshara mantra, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, fill the air. One glimpse of the Brahman under the tree, he knew. He knew that he had found this guru. He ran to him, fell at his feet, and put his head down. Shiva was waiting for this. He cast a graceful glance, and in that one glance, removed all of his sins and purified his heart. Shiva himself initiated Vadavura into the divine mysteries of Sivajnana. The very initiation entranced Vadavura. He turned into a sannyasi and plunged into a deep meditation. When he awoke, he had gained the ability to compose songs. விண்ணாளோ தேவர்க்கு மேலாய வேதியனை மேலாய வேதியனை மேலாய வேதியனை விண்ணாளோ தேவர்க்கு மேலாய வேதியனை மண்ணாளோ மன்னவர்க்கு மாண்பாகி நின்றானை தன்னார் தமிழ் அளிக்கும் தன் பாண்டி நாட்டானை தன்னார் தமிழ் அளிக்கும் தன் பாண்டி நாட்டானை பெண்ணாளும் பாகனை பேணும் பெருந்துறையில் கண்ணார் கழல் காட்டி நாயேனை ஆட்கொண்ட கண்ணார் கழல் காட்டி நாயேனை ஆட்கொண்ட அண்ணாமலை யானை பாடுதுங்கானம்மானாய். He recalls fondly later in his songs, Shiva, in one glance, you took over me. I am just like a little dog. You took over me. His words poured out with gems of wisdom. Shiva himself was pleased and named him Manikkavacakar. The Lord asked Manikkavacakar to remain at Tirupparandurai and disappeared. The king's servants who had accompanied Vadavura thought that he had forgotten the whole mission. So after waiting for a few days, they gently reminded him. Vadavura sent them all packing. He sent them back to the king and said, go tell him that the horses will reach Madurai within 1 month. The king heard what was happening. He heard that he was not really getting into buying horses, and he was a little angry, but decided to give it a month. At Tirupparandurai, Manikkavacakar was devoted to Shiva. and he decided to spend the money he had brought into constructing the temple, the picture that we saw before. Now, Manikkavacakar was pretty smart, and he should realize this is going to cause him trouble, right? Not like the kids at my school. There was a math quiz asking the difference between 8 and 5 is 3. Okay, got that right. How did you find your answer? Using my fingers. Now, of course, what happens in the question 2? What is the difference between 21 and 8? Ran out of fingers. Answer is wrong. And how did you find your answer using math? Right? Now, of course, Vadavura was smart. So after a month, he was expecting an angry note from the king. You better appear right now and explain yourself. Kind of like being called to the principal's office. But Manikkavacakar was still upset. He didn't know what to do. So he went to the temple and prayed for Shiva's protection. Shiva came in his dream and said, don't be afraid. I will bring the best horses to Madurai. You just go in advance and tell the king. The horses will arrive there on the day of Avani Moolam. As it so happens, this year's Avani Moolam just passed about a week back. We are in the Avani month. The Lord disappeared after placing a diamond in Manikkavacakar's hand. The next morning, Manikkavacakar left Perandurai and wearing this ministerial robe started for Madurai. Manikkavacakar bowed before the king, gave the diamond and explained, Your Majesty, I already bought all the horses with the money you gave. A complete bold-faced lie. I was waiting for an auspicious day on which to bring the horses here. Avani Moolam is just the perfect day. In the meantime, since you commanded, I am here now. The horses will be here soon. So, meantime, one of the ministers told the king, Manikkavacakar is just lying. Don't believe a word he says. So the king sent some messengers to Perandurai to see whether there were any horses. They came back and said, there are no horses, king. All that is there is a beautiful new temple. The king got mad. He told the soldiers to torture Manikkavacakar and try to recover any money they can. Manikkavacakar just kept quiet and bore through everything, fixing his mind on Shiva. Avani Moolam, the Lord heard Bhakta's prayer and decided to play his drama. So Shiva decided that all the foxes in the forest around Madurai should turn into horses. And he sent his servants to act as horsemen, and Shiva himself decided to come in the form of a trader. And everybody reached the outskirts of Madurai. The day was Avani Moolam. The dust raised by the galloping horses filled the sky. People were amazed to see such fine horses. The king was sad that he had unnecessarily tortured Manikkavacakar. He released him and apologized. Both went to see the horses. The king was so happy at the sight of the fine horses, and the merchant was also very handsome. Manikkavacakar realized it was Shiva himself and mentally did namaskaram to Shiva. Such were blessed the people of the 9th century. They were able to see Shiva in person. Day passed into night. At the stroke of midnight, howls started to fill the air. The horses turned right back to foxes. The reins around their neck were too big for the small foxes' necks. Howling, they fled the stables and back into the forest. The next morning, the king gets the news, and obviously, there is a punishment coming. He thought Manikkavacakar had done some black magic with the horses. The king's soldiers began to torture Manikkavacakar, making him stand barefoot in the hot sand during the warm, hot days of Avani on the banks of the river Vaigai. And how does Manikkavacakar react? Vendattakkadu arivoy nee, Venda muzhudum daruvoy nee. You know what one should pray for, and you do everything one prays for. Vendi yannai panigondai, Vendi niyadu arul cheidai. You took me as your servant. and what a grace you have showered on me. Can you imagine saying that, standing under the hot sun? Ingu or idayuru emakku undo endol mukkan emmane. Could there be any trouble for me in the world anymore when you are there, the three-eyed Lord? Nandre seivai, pizhai seivai, nano idarku nayagame. You may give me pleasure, you may give me pain. Am I the Lord of this world? Do what you will. And at this, even Shiva couldn't bear the pain of the devotees anymore. He caused an immediate flood in the river Vaigai. The river broke the banks and cooled down the hot sands under Manikkavasakar's feet. The soldiers guarding him fled, seeing the river flooding. There was panic everywhere in the town. People could not understand how a flood could happen in August. Manikkavacakar went to the nearby temple, worshipped Lord Somasundara, and was completely absorbed in meditation. The king was puzzled. He wanted to just save the city. So he ordered everyone in the city to bring a basket full of mud and throw it on the banks of the river. Everyone except an old woman by the name Vanti did so. She sold puttu. It's a South Indian delicacy. Maybe your parents know how to make it. And eked out a meager living selling this. She was so devoted to Lord Somasundara that she would offer it to him daily and then only go sell it. She was in severe distress and prayed to Shiva for help. Shiva appeared as a young laborer before the old woman and offered services in exchange for a handful of pittu. With a dirty cloth around his waist and a basket on the head, Shiva himself walked on earth among the people at the town of Madurai. He would sing and dance and put mud on the banks of the river. He ate Vandi's kind offering and threw the mud with such force that it caused new breaches. The king's servants pretty soon noticed this part was not getting closed and reported the matter to the king. The king, who had personally supervised the work, came, saw the idle laborer sleeping, and hit him with a stick. And lo and behold, that blow was felt by all beings in the world, including the king himself. The king turned, and he was surprised. I hit him. Why does it hurt me? And in a moment, he realized this was Shiva. Shiva being in everyone meant that you hit him. Everyone feels it. And this is an actual reenactment that takes place in Madurai every year. The king at once understood that it was the Lord's drama and also recognized the greatness of Manikkavacakar. So at that time, he heard an asariri, an invisible voice. O king, your entire wealth was spent on me and my bhaktas. By this act, Manikkavacakar got you great punya. Instead of being thankful, you tortured him. The foxes turning into horses and the sudden flood were all done by me for the sake of my bhakta. At least now learn a lesson. In the meantime, Manikkavacakar was in meditation at the temple, and he too felt the blow. And he got up from his meditation. The king finds him, apologizes, and requests him to come back as his prime minister again. Manikkavacakar politely declines and requests that he should be allowed to spend the rest of his life in service of Shiva. After spending time at Tiruparandurai and visiting many temples, Shiva had one final miracle waiting for Manikkavacakar. He tells him to go to Chidambaram and continue to sing. The time had come for the final miracle, the one that will make Tiruvasagam world-renowned and will result in Manikkavacakar disappearing and attaining moksha. Shiva again disguises himself as a Brahmin, trying to learn Tamil works. He goes to Manikkavacakar. Manikkavacakar welcomes the guest with respect and asked him, what are you looking for? Shiva told him, I want to hear Tiruvasagam from you directly and I will write it down so I can learn from it and help free myself from the cycle of birth and death. Manikkavacakar agrees and starts to recite, Namachivaya Varganadhan Thalvarga, Imaipoludum Ennenjil Ningadan Thalvarga. And as the man spoke, the great Lord, wrote it down on palm leaves. When it was all done, the Brahmin simply disappeared from Manikkavacakar's house, and as did all the palm leaves. At once, Manikkavacakar knew that the Brahmin was none but Lord Shiva himself. He felt terrible anguish for not having recognized the Lord. The next morning, the Brahmins of Thillai, the Chidambaram temple, opened the doors to the Nataraja temple. And lo and behold, what was on the top step? The Panchakshara step of the Chitsabha. It was the palm leaves inscribed the previous day and night. But there was an extra leaf added now at the end. Tiruvadavoorar solla solla Alagiya Sitrambalamudayon எழுதியது. As Tiruvadavoorar told, the beautiful Lord of Chidambaram wrote this. And the crowd realized what great work they held in their hand, and everyone thronged to learn the meaning of these poems. Manikkavacakar himself was so moved that Shiva himself held this work in his hands. He tells the assembled, everyone wants to know the meaning of these things, and he tells them all, can I tell the meaning of these poems in front of Nataraja? They all agree. The 3,000 strong crowd watched from the hall, from the great hall, the Chitsabha. And Manikkavacakar says, see the Lord with an enigmatic smile. One who comes among his devotees, one who creates, protects, and destroys all world. He is the meaning of all of these poems. Tiruvasagam itself is nothing but Shiva himself. At that moment, Manikkavacakar turned into a Jyoti, a flash of light, and gently moved and disappeared into the feet of Nataraja with nary a trace of his body. This is a great work. You can read all of his poems in just 6 hours. Few think Tamil is challenging. Gandhiji learned Tamil so he could connect with Tiruvasagam. A missionary, Reverend G.U. Pope, translated Tiruvasagam into English, and he was so moved by this, he started including a line from Tiruvasagam in every letter he wrote. I urge all of you to consider taking the time to learn and read this great work. I will conclude with a prayer that is recited even today to wake up Shiva at the temples. Please close your eyes for a minute. Imagine a scene. There are musicians playing veena on one side. On the other side, people are telling prayers. Behind them stand people with garlands, and people moved by all the prayers. Way at the end are people with hands raised over their heads, doing namaskaram. Nataraja is dancing with a sweet smile in your own heart, and he opens his eyes. Innisai வீணையர் யாழினரோருபாலிருக்கொடுதோத்திரம் இயம்பினரோருபால் துன்னிய பிணை மலர் கையினரோருபால் தொழுகையர் அழுகையர் துவழ்கையரோருபால் சென்னியில் அஞ்சலி கூப்பினரோருபால் திருப்பெருந்துறையூரை சிவபெருமானே என்னையும் ஆண்டு கொண்டு இன்னருள் போரியும் எம்பெருமான் பள்ளி எழுந்தருளாயே எழுந்தருளா எழுந்தருளா எழுந்தருளா. Shiva Chitrambalam. May Lord Shiva forever reside in your hearts. Thank you all for the opportunity. Appalam Madisarndar Ediarkum Madiyen Aruran Narura Lammanakani. Thank you.